Hi, my name is Kim Daniels. I'm the CEO of Mercantile Logistics and International Trade. I am a committee member for the Research, Innovation, and Strategy Committee of ASCM. We are here today with James George, who is working in circular economy. James, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks very much for having me. My name is James George. I work for the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We are a economic think tank around, as you mentioned there, Kim, circular economy. I look after network development for the foundation. So that is trying to firstly help understand what different organizations' aspirations are around circular economy, and then how they connect to the foundation in a meaningful way and into the different programs and platforms and bodies of work that we have.
Great. Could you go into a little bit, just a little reminder caption of, what circular economy is on a definition?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I think to your opening comments around, this is potentially a new concept to some of your members. I guess it's worth also giving a bit of context around the foundation as well. So, we've been doing this for 10 years now. We're an NGO based in the UK, but actually our remit is global. And of our 160, 170 kind of staff members, we've got folks in North and South America, across Europe, and also operating out of China in Beijing. But the origins of the foundation are by a lady called Ellen MacArthur. She was a professional sailor, professional round-the-world sailor, had 2 world records. And Ellen tells the origins of the kind of foundation and the concepts that came to be where we are today around her last round-the-world record attempt. That, on Christmas Day 2008, at this particular moment, she's 60 days into her journey. She's in the Southern Ocean. She's 2,000 nautical miles away from any human contact. Everything on that boat at that particular moment that she was solo navigating, all the food, all the fuel, all the provisions, were all the resources she had. She couldn't get any more. She actually jokes at that particular moment on Christmas Day in 2008, the nearest human contact to her was the International Space Station above her head.
Wow.
And this particular moment, as you do, nothing could really link to Ellen more strongly this idea of finite resource. And the fact that our global economies are built on finite resource. We take stuff out of the ground, we make stuff, all the great and amazing products and services that we see around in our world today. And at the end of their useful life, when we're bored with them, we throw them away. So we can get the latest version, the latest design. And in throwing them away, they are either landfilled or incinerated, or they leach into our environment. And there's lots of evidence of kind of that. So you would consider this pretty much a linear economy. Material in at the beginning, a product's created, and at the end, waste is generated. But it's a throughput system. It doesn't make really good utilization of that material. It has no capture mechanism for the IP, the labor, the energy that's gone into making those products in the first place. And actually, when we're done with it, we throw it away. So the circular economy then works in a slightly different way. And in the very simplest form, it's about taking that line, that linear economy, and making it a circle. Going from linear extraction to a period where you have value creation. So rather than just extracting value through, you're creating value in those circles. You're keeping those materials in circulation. In doing so, you're designing out waste and pollution. And along the way, hopefully then you're regenerating natural systems, you're regenerating natural capital. And those are the 3 principles of a circular economy.
Well, that brings me to my question. If you would go into what those 3 principles are, that would be awesome.
No, of course. Yeah. So the 3 principles for us, we start with design out waste and pollution. Waste is it's a man-made concept. If you look at biological systems, and a lot of our work and thinking is when we look at system change and system engagement comes from the biological world. No waste is created in biological systems. It's only secondary resource. Now, of course, if a bird dies and falls to the ground, it doesn't become another bird. But actually the nutrients go back into that system. They feed the soil life that allows the system to continue to generate and continue to cycle. So it's about looking at how do we design out this man-made construction that's waste. And for areas where we can't, how do we consider it a secondary resource? How can the end life of a product become the starting material for the next generation of products? And there are lots of examples of like that within the commercial world already. But it's about starting at the design stage and designing out the material we don't need. Second principle is around keeping materials in circulation. Again, this is a really great one when we start talking about supply chains and resilience. How do we move this material around? But actually, how do we make sure we have the mechanisms to do stuff with it at the end of that first or second cycle? One of the challenges you see around people's understanding of circular economy is that this is just recycling or better recycling. Recycling is part of it, but actually that's for us the loop of least resort. The recycling symbol's been around for 45 years, right? And out of all the material we produce annually, all of the material, not just plastics, but everything we create across the globe, we only actually collect around 14% of that material, and we only closed loop recycle 2%. So we're never going to recycle our way out of this challenge. So by keeping materials in circulation, it's to make sure that when we make something, it's made to be made again. So it could be anything. The chair that you're sitting on, the laptop that we have in front of us, is designed in a way that when we no longer want this version, it can be taken back into the system, it can be deconstructed, and the components and the materials can be made into the next generation. And also, whilst it's in circulation, the level of utility is as high as possible. If you take a car, right? On average in the US, a car costs about $25,000, roughly, let's say for argument's sake.
Right.
The average car sits idle for 92% of its life. That's 22 hours a day. Ask yourself right now, Kim, where's your car? What's it doing, right? Nothing.
Nothing.
Exactly. If you spent $25,000 on that vehicle, or even more in some cases, what is that value doing for you? What is that sunken cost doing for you? That's not a good utilization. Take that a stage further, and actually of that remaining 8% utility, about 1 to 1.5% of it is spent in traffic or looking for a parking space. And despite the average car having 4 seats, the majority of journeys only take 1.5 people, well, 1/2 people in a journey. Yet 50% of our city infrastructure is designed around the car. Mm-hmm. So there are huge amounts of underutilization. Unlock the right business model and you unlock the value. And we see that with things like Airbnb, Zipcar, this utilization of assets that we have that just aren't used when we're using them. And then the final principle: regenerate natural systems, regenerate natural capital. Over the last 200 to 300 years, a couple of industrial revolutions, we've got really good at making stuff, taking stuff out of the ground, making products and pushing innovation. The problem is that in doing so, we've kind of paid party to any kind of environmental or impact that might have. And in our race for efficiency and getting better, that impact has got worse and worse.
Right. None
of us are blind to that fact, right? None of us, can escape the staggering stories we hear. Since 1970, there's been a 27% reduction in global species in general. By UN report last year, at least 1 million species face extinction in the next 5 to 10 years. And even if you don't believe all the science, that's a staggering level of impact. And notwithstanding what we've all experienced globally recently, shifts in the way that the system is operating is not working for us anymore in the way that we're doing it. So looking at regenerating natural systems and generating natural capital, how do we make sure that our processes, our activities create zero impact and actually start to regenerate the impact that came before us? Be that our oceans, our fields, our public spaces, just making sure that we're starting to rebalance some of that impact through the production process.
So there's a couple of examples that you brought to mind for how an individual sort of gets involved in the circular economy without even knowing that they're doing it. So I was raised by a mechanic. and we had old cars my whole life. My car is a 2007 Pontiac Grand Prix GXP. I absolutely love it. And I pay cash for it. So what we do in my family is, rather than just trade it in because it's got this minor problem with it, financially that's not responsible. But on top of that, we're already getting involved in using it until it can no longer be used. So my mechanic replaces all those parts rather than just trading it in for a new car. It was better and less costly than going into thousands and thousands of dollars worth of debt to simply fix those parts. And we would go to junkyards. When I was a kid, we would go to junkyards and find, replacement motors, replacement transmissions, replacement, doors, whatever it was, until the car just simply could not be used anymore. Yeah. So something like that.
Yeah, exactly. We've almost lost the art of make, do, and mend.
Well, it's so easy now, right? It's so easy to take your car in and get in debt.
Exactly, 0% credit, all that. So yeah, and there's part of that in that as well, that the system that allows you to continually consume and consume in a way that you don't have to think about is tomorrow's problem.
Right.
Is not a system that works in the long term. Right. Exactly your point, right? How do you repair? How do you reuse? How do you remanufacture the materials, the items, be they cars and that sort of thing? And it's a lost art. For generations, that's what we did. And you're absolutely right. There'll be lots of people out there that just do that in their everyday lives. Okay. Right. And that's really encouraging to see. And you don't have to call it circular economy for it to apply the circular principles.
Right.
But the challenge is always, how do we zoom out? How do we make sure that, we're doing that in our everyday life, but how do we make sure that the huge volumes of materials and products that we create are made and maintained and circulated within our economies in the same way? And that's how we have to start shifting business models. And we, in the kind of the build up to this call, you and I had a discussion around kind of, let's bring it to the individual. And that's really important, right? That individuals make conscious decisions. But there are only bad choices in a bad system. Right. So it doesn't matter how good you are as an individual, if the overall system with the sheer volumes of millions of tons of material continues to operate in a broken way. And I'll give you one very, very specific example, if I may. Coca-Cola, okay? Coca-Cola produced 30 million tons of plastic a year. We work very closely with Coke. So if you and I, Kim, for the rest of our lives, decided not to buy Coke, and we also decided that we were going to take part in beach cleans and ocean cleanups, even if we did that every day for the rest of our lives, we wouldn't come close to the impact we could have if we shifted the way Coca-Cola operated by 1 or 2%. So sometimes it is about what can I do? But actually that, for me, the bigger question is, what do I do within the organization I work for?
Right.
How do I influence the area of control that I have? If I sit in a very long supply chain, how do I make sure that what I am doing is the best possible version of what I should be doing as that holistic system? How do we then engage with the other elements of the value chain across the supply chain to say, do you know what, this is how we're doing this is how our factory is going to operate now. And if you want to work with us, these are the principles you need to adhere to. And anything that's coming into our factory, also this is where it needs to kind of draw the line. So it is about individual effort, but it's also about what does that individual play in the larger system.
So to that point, what is an example of somebody who produces that much plastic that's just destined for waste? I mean, whether people recycle or not, it's plastic bottle. You're not going to reuse it in your home for most of the time. Most people. So what is a better option? Is it switching over to glass, and because glass can be reused forever? Or is it, cans that can be more easily recycled? Or what? I mean, what's the option there for a company like Coca-Cola?
I mean, it's a really great question. And this is where we get into the beauty of the complexity of system level engagement, right? This isn't an anti-plastics agenda as well. Just because I use Coke as an example, like I say, we work with Coca-Cola very, very closely, as we do with PepsiCo and Nestle and a number of others. If you have a system whereby, and we use the same example, Coke makes their bottle, goes to the consumer, but there is a mechanism for that material to be returned to Coke or returned to the bottler to be melted down through chemical recycling or physically recycled through mechanical recycling back into virgin grade material, and that indefinitely becomes a Coke bottle, then that's brilliant, right? That's the idea of a circular economy. A Coke bottle becomes a Coke bottle, becomes a Coke bottle indefinitely. Right. If, however, that system doesn't exist because of infrastructure, because of culture, because of convenience, then you're never going to be able to achieve that. And that's when maybe innovating and looking at additional materials, be it glass, metal, whatever it might be. But again, that only works if the system around it is set up to reclaim that material.
Right.
So this is where that, it shouldn't be plastic, it should be glass, but then glass has a higher CO2 footprint per weight, and it's heavier, it costs more to transport. Okay, we'll go with metal, aluminium. 95 to 99% of all aluminium is recycled in Europe. I know that's not the same in North America. But again, that's then maybe not the right solution in that particular context. It's about understanding all of the complexities within the system. And there's always a simple solution, and that simple solution is always wrong. For a complex challenge, you need a complex solution. And that takes time to understand all the dynamics of that system.
So James, how do you tie that circularity to a company's supply chain? How does that work?
Yeah, I guess I'm no supply chain expert, right? So I won't try and talk in your terms, but it's at the heart of a circular economy, how we move materials around, how we track and trace those materials, and how we make sure that we minimize the loss of those materials as they move from point to point. It's really important, because if you can't track it, if you can't bring it back, how can you keep it in circulation? One of the other things around circular economy is building resilience within supply chains. Now, a few months ago, I did go and speak to a mutual friend of mine who is an expert within supply chain, and she explained to me the concept of the bullwhip effect. For one product, the kind of all the nuances that have to go through that supply chain. And I was just astounded actually around how that could lead to huge volumes of wasted material just to meet the demands of one product. So when you take a circular lens to the supply chain, it's about trying to build that resilience, making sure that where you can localize production, manufacture, and distribution. We've seen recently with COVID-19, right? One of the weakest links around the supply chain have been the sheer distances that materials have to travel. And when you get a breakdown within that system, you can't control the flow of those materials. So looking at how you localize where possible for your needs and have a localized distribution is one way of building resilience. And there are lots of nuanced examples as well, but it's critical to look at the whole supply chain and value chain movement of those materials when you look at these challenges through a circular lens.
And excellent. Well, thank you so much, James. I think that that really sums up a lot of what we're trying to do. If you could provide some of your contact information, and then we can go ahead and close this out.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. And it's been a real pleasure. And I know this is the first of a number that you guys are doing across some different areas. But if anyone does want to reach out to me or learn a little bit more about what the foundation does and how, whether they are actually doing circular economy themselves already, do feel free to visit our website, ellenmacarthurfoundation.org, or indeed just get in touch with me directly through LinkedIn or otherwise. I appreciate I've monologued quite a lot today and sort of thrown quite a few words at people. So if anyone wants to pick anything up beyond that, do feel free to do so.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kim.